So, okay. So we've been reading from the 26th word, which is a treatise on divine determining and by extension, the power of choice. And the section we are currently on is the third topic, where Norcy says he will show how strong and broad is the belief that everything is determined by Almighty God. So I'll now read through some of the third topic just to familiarize ourselves again with the material. So third topic, belief in divine determining is one of the pillars of belief. That is the belief that everything is determined by Almighty God. The certain proofs for divine determining are so numerous that they cannot be calculated. We shall show in an introduction simply and clearly how strong and broad is this pillar of belief. Numerous verses of the Quran, like, nor anything fresh or dry, green or withered is but inscribed in a clear book, just Surah 6, verse 59. This verse states clearly that before a thing comes into existence and after it passes from existence, everything is written through its creational signs like the order, balance, regularity, adornment, differentiation, and the giving of form. The verses, the signs of the mighty Quran inscribed by divine power and called the universe confirm these statements of the Quran. Indeed, the well-ordered missives and finely balanced verses of the book of the universe testify that everything is written. The indication that everything is determined and written before it comes into existence are all beginnings, seeds, measured proportions, and forms. Each of these testifies to this, for seeds and grains are subtle containers appearing from the workbench of B, and it is in each of which is deposited a tiny index traced by divine determining. Divine power employs minute particles according to that plan of divine determining and constructs the mighty miracles of power on the seeds. That is to say, everything that will happen to the tree is as though inscribed in its seed. For in regard to their substance, seeds are simple and similar to one another. Materially, they are nothing. Furthermore, the well-measured proportions of everything clearly show divine determining. Yes, whatever living creature is considered, it is as though its form and measure emerged from a wisely and skillfully wrought mold. For it to receive such a measure, form, and shape, either there has to be a truly wondrous and infinitely intricate physical mold, or else pre-eternal power cuts out the form and shape according to a well-proportioned immaterial mold that exists in knowledge and comes from divine determining and clothes it in it. For example, look carefully at this tree or that animal, and you will see that the particles, which are lifeless, deaf, blind, unconscious, and similar to one another, are in motion in its growth and development. In some of the being's intricate extremities, the particles halt as though seeing, knowing, and recognizing the place of fruits and benefits. Then in another place, they change their direction as though following some important aim. That means they are in motion in accordance with the immaterial measured proportions of the tree or animal, which come from divine determining and are governed by those proportions. Since there are manifestations of divine determining, To this extent, in physical and visible things, certainly the forms with which things are clothed with the passing of time and the states acquired through the motions they perform will also be dependent on the ordering of divine determining. In a seed are two manifestations of divine determining. One is evident and points to the clear book, which is a title of will and the creational commands. The other is theoretical and points to the clear record, which is a title of divine knowledge and the divine command. Evident divine determining specifies the physical nature, states, and parts of the tree which the seed comprises, while theoretical divine determining specifies the stages, states, forms, motions, and glorifications which the tree will undergo and perform over the period of its life and which are in the seed and will be. While theoretical, let me read that last sentence over. While theoretical divine determining specifies the stages, states, forms, motions, and glorifications with the tree, which the tree will undergo and perform over the period of its life, and which are in the seed and will be created from it. These stages, states, forms, and acts, which constantly change and are called its life history, each have a regulated measure in accordance with divine determining, the same as the tree's branches and leaves. Since there is such a manifestation of divine determining in the most common and simple of things, it surely demonstrates that all things are written before they come into existence. This may be understood with little attention. Now, evidence for the fact that the story of everything's life is written after its existence are all fruits, which in this world tell of the clear book and the clear record and the faculty of memory in man, which points to the preserved tablet. These all hint and testify to this fact. Indeed, the appointed events of a tree's life are written in its seeds, which are like the hearts of its fruits. And man's life history, together with some of the past events of the world, are written in his memory in such a way that, as though copying out with the hand of power and pen of divine determining in a faculty as tiny as a mustard seed, a small note from the page of his actions, the memory gives the note to man's hand and puts it in the pocket of his mind, so that with it he will call his actions to mind at the time of reckoning. So to do to it, he may be confident that within the upheavals of transience and death there are numerous lasting mirrors in which the all powering and wise one depicts and makes permanent the identities of transient beings, and truly numerous tablets which shall endure for all eternity, on which that all knowing preserver inscribes the meanings of transitory beings. In short, since plant life, the simplest and lowest level of life, is dependent on the ordering of divine determining, to this extent, certainly human life, the highest level of life, has been drawn in all in its details according to the scale and measuring of divine determining and is inscribed by its pen. Yes, just as raindrops tell of clouds and drops of water point to the existence of a water source, and notes and portfolios to the existence of a large ledger, so too the evident divine determining which we observe and which is the physical order in living beings indicates the notebook of divine will and creational commands, known as the clear book. Similarly, their fruits, seeds, grains, forms, and shapes, which are like the droplets, notes, and portfolios of theoretical divine determining, which is the non physical order and pertains to life, indicates the preserved tablet, one office of divine knowledge, which is called the clear record. To conclude, we see clearly that at the time of their growth and development, the particles of living beings travel to their intricate extremities and halt. Then they change their path. At each of the extremities, they produce the fruits of benefits, uses, and instances of wisdom. Clearly, the forms of those things and their measures are drawn with a pen of determining, thus observable. Evident determining shows that in the non physical states, in the non physical states of living beings are also well ordered, fruitful extremities and limits drawn with the pen of determining. Divine power is the source, divine determining is the pattern. Power writes the meaningful book on that pattern since we understand clearly that the fruits, full limits, and purposeful extremities have been drawn with the pen of divine determining, physical and non physical. Certainly, the states and stages which all living beings undergo in the course of their lives are also drawn with that pen, for their life stories follow with a course with order and balance. They change forms and receive shapes, since the pen of divine determining thus rules in all living beings. Surely the life history of man, the world's most perfect fruits and vicegerent of the earth and bearer of the supreme trust, is more than anything dependent on the law of divine determining. Alrighty, let's move back. So I believe we covered last week, we covered everything, including this last paragraph down here. And if there are no, if we're okay with moving on, uh, we'll continue with the next paragraph, which is this one here. So I'll read it again and maybe we can analyze it in more minute detail. So, since there is such a manifestation of divine determining, I don't know, it might be necessary to read it together. So, I think in summary, this paragraph here is making mention of two types of divine determining. One is the theoretical, and it says it points to a clear record relating to divine knowledge and divine command, whereas there is another evident divine determining specifying physical nature, states, and parts of a tree, for example, and what the seed comprises. And since there is such a manifestation of divine determining in the most common and simple of things, it surely demonstrates that all things are written before they come into existence. This may be understood with little attention. Now, evidence for the fact that the story of everything's life is written after its existence are all fruits which in this world tell of the clear book and the clear record, and the faculty of memory in man which points to the preserved tablet. These all hint and testify to this fact. Indeed, the appointed events of a tree's life are written in its seed, which are like the hearts of its fruits, and man's life history, together with some of the past events of the world, are written in his memory in such a way that, as though copying out with the hand of power and pen of divine determining in a faculty as tiny as a mustard seed a small note from the page of his actions, the memory gives the note to man's hand and puts it in the pocket of his mind, so that with it he will call his actions to mind at the time of reckoning. So to due to it he may be confident that within the upheavals of transience and death there are numerous lasting mirrors in which the all-powerful and wise one depicts and makes permanent the identities of transient beings, and truly numerous tablets which shall endure for all eternity, on which that all-knowing preserver inscribes the meanings of transitory beings. All right, brother Beer Khan, would you like to make a comment?
Jazakallah khairan. Assalamu alaikum. I'd like to ask you a question, actually. So the previous part that we studied last week and the week before, it was about that all things are written before they come into existence. So they come into existence with the divine determining. That was the topic. And now it says everything's life is written after its existence. So I'm not sure what this means. Is it just about keeping the record of what exists before? So what do you understand from, I'm using the you in plural form, what do you understand from everything's life being written after its existence?
Yeah, brother Birkan, thank you for pointing out this possible, or rather this inconsistency, it seems, apparent inconsistency in the writings of Nursi. Is it a mistake, or is it an intentional writing or comment? Did he intend to write in that way, where he's saying things are written before their creation or after their creation, through divine determining? Would someone have a potential answer onto the explanation behind this? Brother Yusuf.
So at the very beginning, the verse was saying, "Wala ratbi wala yabisin illa fi kitabin mubin." So dry or fresh or wet, everything is written. So, and the author interpreted this as everything is written before it happens and after it happens. Generally, our understanding of qadar is like things are recorded before they happen. But the verse was mentioning before and after it happens, everything is written. And then, so now what this might further indicate is that this record keeping is not fruitless. Like, it's not only that everything is planned and here everything is being put in front of you with the way that it's recorded, but also that everything that happens is being kept recorded, because as we studied, still human is given this power of choice and there's responsibility of that. So that knowledge has a consequence for me. My choices has a consequence for me. So my choices are being recorded as well. And I'm going to see those consequences of these choices in an eternal life, is what I can say by looking at the existence. And this is happening right in front of my eyes. Things are recorded, but also their actions are being recorded on seeds for the next generation, which means when I'm going to make my choices, I'm going to be held accountable with that. It's not that it's going to be forgotten, nobody will notice and whatnot, but no, I am. This is part of a big picture, and I'm going to be shown that picture again in the future. So this is why I guess this everything is recorded after it happens is also relevant, because without that, the picture is going to be missing. But with that, the purpose of life is now being completed. Why did you have a power of choice in the first place if you're not going to be held accountable for that? So this held accountable part, I guess, is being highlighted.
Okay, yeah, brother Yusuf, thank you for that um, analysis on, the different uses of, how how things are made or created or given being, before or after the fact, um, and how that relates to our choice in the matter, right? If it's everything is determined beforehand, it's almost negating our ability to choose and determine our own fate. But of course, it's we experience the world through a lens of maybe cause and effect, where our choice does have consequences, and we bear responsibility for what we choose. Brother Bir Khan, do you have a comment?
Jazakallah khairan. While listening to Yusuf and you, I also realized that so there's the things being written before and after also establish a continuity in things, right? When we see a tree and then we see the fruit of the tree, they are all connected. So the fruit reflects somehow the shape, type or form, actually the entire history of the parent tree. So there's always this relationship, like you don't get in layman's terms, you don't get a cherry from an orange tree. And when you taste an orange, for instance, you know that it is coming from a tree, the orange tree. So you can know the type of tree by tasting the fruit. So there's this continuity in things, in creation. So it means whatever comes after you, whatever comes after any creature, reflects the creature itself. So the things are written after they pass from the existence, meaning the things are preserved in this continuity.
Thank you, Brother Bir Khan. It's a very interesting um, perspective on the issue at hand. I guess that points to a a level of interaction of how our choices relates to the divine determining. You know we we find ourselves in situations, maybe and we make choices, and we send we send the ball back to God's court, and he'll send it back, and maybe there's a sort of cycle of interaction between us and God and the rest of creation itself, because everything, I guess, is also making their own choice and has its own will. Maybe that perhaps this points to a level of interconnectedness between all things and every moment. That, but that's what I think of from that. Yusuf mentioned part of this this uh, latter section of this paragraph of the example of the role of human memory, and how things are being recorded in the human mind is a sort of reflection of the clear book, that everything in existence is recorded somewhere. Does anyone have any comments on that section? This bulk that's highlighted here. Brother Beer Khan.
It is also interesting that the author uses something that we have very close relationship, our memory, as the evidence for preserved tablets and things being preserved, things being recorded, and you know it from your memory. So your faculty itself serves you this evidence. So when you think about your life and say that, everything I do is just wasted. I'm not producing anything. I'm just a useless being. My life doesn't have a purpose. Then your memory would say, no, this is not true. You remember things, don't you? Which means everything about you is recorded. Nothing is wasted. And what will come is also part of the divine determining, as we studied before. So your life, whether you enjoy the moment currently or not, your life has a purpose. It's a determined purpose. It is coming from a knowledge, a divine knowledge. So nothing is wasted, nothing is purposeless, nothing is just momentary. Everything is eternal, and you know that from your memory. Things are preserved. Or you know it from a seed of a tree, because everything about the tree is preserved. So this, I guess, goes easily beyond just proving that there's divine determining. It also, it gives a purpose and meaning to your life as well. Nothing about you is wasted.
That's very interesting, I guess. So what you're saying is that because these minute details and experiences of our life that we call as memory, that they are being preserved, that it seems these things that seemingly inconsequential that we remember, oh, maybe I did this yesterday, I had this for breakfast, I did this or that, or whatever, various parts of our life, that it is recorded and that it is remembered, that makes it something of importance itself. If it wasn't important, then it would have been forgotten. That's what I'm perhaps getting out of it. And that would, I guess that would make sense if we understand it, that it's, an involuntary thing, that God is actively, letting you hold these memories with his action. It's an interesting point. Of course, then there's people like me who tend to forget many things. So maybe those things are just not that important. Most of my life, I guess. But moving on. I'll say I don't necessarily understand the minute details of the all these words of the tree's life are written in seeds, which are the hearts of its fruits, and man's life history together with some past events. It's a little wordy for me, but I think I understand the general idea. Just putting that out there. And I think we can move on. If there are no more further comments or questions, we can move on to the next paragraph. So Nursi seems to be summarizing his earlier points. Since plant life, the simplest and lowest level of life, is dependent on the ordering of divine determining to this extent. Certainly, human life, the highest level of life, has been drawn in all in its details according to the scale and measuring of divine determining, and is inscribed by its pen. Yes, just as raindrops tell of clouds and drops of water point to the existence of a water source, and notes and portfolios of to the existence of a large ledger, so to the evident divine determining which we observe, and which is the physical order in living beings, indicates the notebook of divine will and creational commands known as the clear book. Similarly, their fruits, seeds, grains, forms, and shapes, which are like the droplets, notes, and portfolios of theoretical divine determining, which is the non physical order and pertains to life, indicates the preserved tablet, one office of divine knowledge, which is called the clear record. So, I guess, yeah, he's, furthering the analogy. We're talking about seeds and trees in the previous examples. He's extending that to human life, where if seeds can point to divine determining, and that um yeah, that the seed itself is known to God, and that it is can be proven to be uh, affected by divine will, and so too is the human potential and human, I don't know, existence, something like that. Um, I think we talked about a lot of this already, as it is a summary. Brother Yusuf.
So, like at this summary part, now, yeah, so with that summary, so I'm asking the question to myself, now that we have studied so many parts, what is it that we are now concluding? And maybe after reading the conclusion, this might be a better fit to discuss there. Uh, but so far, what we said is, in the first one, after that belief, after the first point, we said that you come to a point that you give everything or attribute everything to the creator and give away or give up from all your false claims of ownership. But then comes the point where you're going to assume responsibility for your wrongdoings. And then you're not going to be proud of anything that's good. And you're going to attribute it to the creator. So this was the first point. And at the end of the first point, the topic was pretty much settled. At the second point, the author talked about why there is no contradiction between divine knowledge and like eternal divine knowledge and humans' uh, power of choice. Now that we are at the third point, what are we seeing here? The author says the proof for divine determining is so clear and everywhere. He started examples by giving examples from the plants and let's say anything that we observe in front of our eyes, in which we see that what's going to happen next was already written before it even came into existence. So this is a clear proof that it's written beforehand. It says even after things happen and decay, still their memories are being left in various different forms. Human memories are one example for that, or even we can think about any sort of uh, trace that's left behind is sort of a memory. So, but now what is he saying? At this moment, now he is saying that as if completing the picture and reminding us what sort of a big conclusion we are now arriving at. And that big conclusion is, if the plant is written before and after, and life of the plant is just relative to human life, and for the purpose of existence of the universe, existence of a plant versus existence of a human is like, just imagine the comparison between them. Given the importance of human for the purpose of existence of this universe, everything that pertains to human is also recorded before it happens and after it happens. So everything is within an order in what's going through in my life. So although we studied everything, the shocking question that happens, what do you mean? My hands are tied then. Like, where's my choice question? Again, immediately pops up in my mind, which again, for me, I need to go back to the second point. So what was the main premise of the second point then? He was saying that, no, there is no contradiction between you choosing and the creator knowing your choice eternal. And because the contradiction was happening, just because you think the knowledge of creator as your knowledge, and eternity you were imagining it to be beginning, a far beginning at time. This was the reason of contradiction. But you cannot speculate anything about the nature of eternal knowledge. All you know is it is known. It, like, the knowledge is must exist, and absolute knowledge must exist based on its manifestation. So this is why it's, although still some part of me is inclined to say, well, how come? It sounds like a contradiction and whatnot. After all these studies, it's interesting that now we come to that point saying that no, everything in my life also is determined before and recorded after it comes into existence. So I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, thank you, Brother Yusuf, for um, further elaborating and making clear what exactly is being um, implied in this, I don't know, analogy or extension of how plants being dependent on divine determining, how that relates to human beings as well. Any further comments or questions on this section? Brother Suhail.
Assalamualaikum. Just wanted to emphasize a point, kind of along the lines of what Yusuf was saying, in that this contradiction that we have in our mind, that do I really have the ability to choose? His reasoning, I think, is very important here, because he uses his experience of the world, his observation of the world, or observation of himself, to point to the necessity of the clear record, looking at the clear book, and which points to the clear record. That's why he makes the analogy between, a notebook, or what does he use? In that paragraph, he says, notes and portfolios to the existence of a large ledger. In other words, we're living on a note. We're just a page, so to speak. And in our observation of it, this is evident divine determining. It's my experience. And I use that to say that, all things must be known within his absolute knowledge, because it necessarily points to that. And so too can I look at my choices and using my observation, my experiences, and my choices to say, therefore, my choices must be known, and not work backwards and say, oh, well, he determined my choices, because I don't work from that perspective. I don't work from him to me, but I work from me to him. That's the path. Because I don't see him, I don't see his clear record. So I can't talk about his clear record in a vacuum without talking about my experience and the world around me, the universe. It's impossible. So I need to speak about my experience of the world and then therefore refer back to the clear record and his divine knowledge. That's the way. Otherwise, then I get caught up in this confusion about, well, he knows what I'm going to do, so therefore I have no choice. That you don't know that he knows until you make a choice and then make an analysis of that choice, saying, oh, what I chose and what I knew about my choice must have been known. I can't speak about him without speaking about my present moment. And I think that's an important thing I took away from is Nursi's reasoning, is that he looks first to the world, to what's evident, and then he talks about what's theoretical. So rather than going from theoretical to evident, rather evident to theoretical.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I think that's a great point that, Norsi's perspective starts, with the self and expands from there rather than being completely detached and maybe more theoretical and philosophical in nature, as that could lead to a lot of maybe trouble and incorrect uh, perspectives or analyses. Brother Beer Khan, would you like to say something?
So I will repeat something I've been saying from the beginning. So I feel like when we study these texts, we are, including myself, consciously, unconsciously, intentionally, unintentionally, imposing certain understandings related to power of choice and divine determining, certain understanding which are not necessarily Quranic into the text. Meaning, we read this text, we say, okay, it is about qadar, and I know what qadar is. Qadar is, whether my choices are determined or not. And power of choice, I know what it is. It means free will. I choose freely. And now this text will explain me how these two are compatible. This is our approach. So for instance, anyway, this is our approach. But to me, I'm not sure, again, like I'm not saying that it is not or it is, but I'm not sure at least that author is approaching the problem from the same perspective. So other than he's saying at the beginning of second topic, how is divine determining compatible with the power of choice? He's not saying how then, my choices are known, or how I'm making some choices freely compatible with everything being written before. He doesn't say that. And so far, I don't remember any part in the text. And I'm saying this, as a means of asking, like, am I mistaken? Just remind me, please. That there's no place in the text so far, maybe it will come, I don't know. But so far, author didn't use not even a single sentence which relates to, for instance, what Yusuf was describing, that I'm making choices and somebody already know what I will choose. Author is not using this. Author is not explaining this. This is how I see it. Maybe again I'm mistaken, but to me it's like author is trying to give us a new framework. He says as if, when it comes to qadar, stop thinking qadar as your choices, what you're going to choose is determined or not. Don't think about it. This is not what qadar is. Qadar is rather whatever you experience, whether relate to your choices or not, whether an output of your choice or not, whatever you experience, it follows a wisdom. It is part of a divine knowledge. So for instance, if you want to talk about your choices, then you cannot, for instance, make a choice in which you take a phone and it becomes a bird. You cannot make such choice. Because whether it is your choice or not, what you're going to experience will follow a pattern. What happens before you make a choice, what happens after you make a choice, it will follow a pattern. And your choices are not about changing this pattern. So this is how we probably, I'm just making guesses, that how we understand power of choice. As if our power of choice is there to change the reality, to change the wisdom, to change the pattern that we observe. It's not. Divine determining is there, meaning the pattern of things. What comes after what? What follows what? It is written. It has a pattern, it has a wisdom. So again, I think we insist in thinking qadar in a way which is taught us from, let's say, movies and Hollywood movies, not even, the Persian movies or the Middle Eastern movies, but the Hollywood movies. And we try to understand these questions within the Hollywood framework, that I'm making choice and I'm the one who determines the outcome, how it is compatible with divine determining. And we think that author is explaining this. To me, at least so far, I didn't see such an explanation.
From practicality point of view, now, like the framework that you're trying to look at from, where does responsibility fit in there? Like, what is going to be the utility of that perspective you are trying to see? I see that the picture is not clear yet on your end either, but because my understanding is that the reason for that topic is being brought up, like the topic of qadar is being brought up, is that I'm going to assume responsibility for my choices, the wrong choices, but for the right choices, I'm going to attribute them to the creator. So like the explanation of the pattern being determined, how does this solve that issue? Because this is the practical outcome, and this is where it's going to be applied.
So I would say this is something similar. Again, it won't be that clear yet, unfortunately. I'm not sure it will be clear in any time, but I would say that probably when we ask this question, we also take responsibility as I created something bad and I'm responsible of it. Like it will follow me. So when I say I will take responsibility of the bad things that I did, so probably we thinking responsibility as something, now, like I gave birth to this child, so I have to take care of it. Maybe responsibility is about, not benefiting something that I could benefit. That I find myself in a state in which I'm not benefiting some bounties that are given to me. It's not about, I made something. It's not about I destroyed something, I created something. I created destruction, for instance. But it's just about the responsibility is that, I chose to be in a state in which I'm not benefiting certain things. Oh, again, what does it mean? I chose something. I have no idea.
I guess, the main gist of the matter is, however we define responsibility, it is something attributable to you. This is the gist of the matter.
Yes.
So what is it that is attributable to me as a creation?
So yeah, I guess that's the question. And as far as I see, author is, at least within the context of these parts of we read so far, is reluctant to answer that. He's not answering it. He says, there are such explanations from Maturidi and so on.
Before coming there, for Sher, he was talking about Sher. Like, he was saying that it's non-existence, and that was being attributed to you. Like, the non-existence is being attributed to me in there.
That's like enigma by itself. Like, if it is non-existence, that there is nothing to be attributable anyway. So again, like what you attribute,
negligence. Let's call it negligence, for instance.
So negligence, yes, negligence is something. So it's not the share. Like when we say share, again, I'm just thinking aloud, loudly. The share is something. At least we take it as something that exists outside us. Like, for instance, when you destroy a building, you say this is share, and it is non-existent, and so on and so forth. So I guess the responsibility, choice, and negligence, as you said, is nothing about, the whether building is destroyed or not. Is whatever it is, it's something with you. It's not with building. But when we try to understand this part by including the building as well in the equation or in the explanation, things get, out of hand. And we do that. Like when we ask questions, this is how I feel, at least. When I ask question, but I make some choices, and these choices are already determined, I'm referring to the outcome of these choices. Hence, there's a problem there. What we should, try to understand is what it means just to make a choice. And we will probably not be able to answer that. I don't know what it means to make a choice. I just know that, there's something that I do go through, which I call as making a choice. That far I know. And at the same time, I feel responsible. I feel the responsibility. I can cover it or not, but I feel the responsibility. It is also given to me. So that's another thing. Like when we say responsibility, for instance, if you are talking about the whether I will feel ashamed or not, we cannot control it. Like the feeling of shame is given to us. So we don't even know like what is the gist of this responsibility that we're talking about. Even when we try to explain responsibility, we won't have anything that left
left to us, we say, okay, the feeling goes to creator. Things going bad, if I'm finding myself in a mood which is not nice, goes to creator. Everything is created by creator. So what left that I can attribute to myself? Again, probably we won't be able to answer that either.
Alrighty. I'm not sure I follow along entirely from what Brother Birkan's where Brother Birkan's disagreement arose, but it seems it's something. It might have something to do with not focusing on the supposed consequences or effects of our choices, but rather maybe why or what we are choosing, and why or what goes into the process of making the choices that we make. That might be what I'm getting out of this. And this, I think the reasoning is because focusing on the outcome is maybe irrelevant because we're not creating the outcome, rather it's created for us.
May I say something?
Yeah,
Just
please. Yeah, please.
Short addition. I'm trying to find the example that author gave about somebody shooting somebody. Sorry? 5? Let me find the, oh yes. Oh no. Here, I guess. Murder Almighty. Murder. So, like it was the question, then you cannot say that it won't happen. Like if he didn't, trigger the gun, the guy wouldn't die. Yeah, here. The question was, yeah, okay, it's just after the end of the 5th. Actually, the 5th. Divine determining has a connection with the cause and effect. That is, this effect will occur through this cause, in which case it may not be said that since so and so's death is determined at such and such a time, what fault has the man who fired the rifle through his own choice? For if he had not fired it, the other still would have died. So that's the question, right?
Mm.
So Yusuf fires a gun, I'm dead. Fanatic says if Yusuf didn't fire the gun, Birkan wouldn't die, and so on and so forth, making such a conclusion. An author says, you cannot say that. So if it was, for instance, the hypothetical Yusuf writing the answer to that, he would try to explain that, about you making the choice, and then through your choice, you have this responsibility, and so on and so forth. He would try to give a positive answer, meaning Yusuf would try to construct explain a mechanism in which this choice and then the consequence and then responsibility come together. Yusuf would do that. Author didn't do that. Instead, he said, oh, but there's a mistake in your thinking. You are thinking divine determining in the wrong way. You assuming it is only relates to cause or just the effect, but not the both of them. And this is a mistake, he says. And he leaves there. So that's what I'm trying to, say exactly. Like when we try to explain something that we have no idea, we are using this Hollywood logic or Western philosophy logic. Let's make it more, valuable. And we assume that, we have an understanding of choice and responsibility and qadar in a certain way. And I think all author does here, He's just trying to, erase this misunderstanding of qadar and power of choice. So this is something different. That's what I'm trying to say.
I see. Thank you for clarifying.
The part that I'm reluctant at here is this should not be in the expense of choice, though.
Yes, it cannot be, because you know that it is there.
Yeah.
Like any explanation, it would be a scientific explanation. If you deny the choice, it would be a scientific philosophical explanation in which you would say, oh yeah, we experience this, but it's a fallacy, or it's a
hallucination.
Hallucination, whatever. But a real explanation cannot deny something that you experience. Yeah, it cannot be. Yeah, you are right. I agree with that. And to the extent we cannot make sense of choice, then we are not there yet. I apologize, Suhail. I made you wait a lot.
Yeah, Brother Suhail, you had your hand up. Would you like to say something?
I'll simply say this, because I know we kind of spent a lot of time, is that to me, I think all problems are solved by focusing on what's evident and then referring back to theoretical. The question of what is choice, what is not choice is frankly, truthfully, sort of in sense irrelevant to me, because that's theoretical. What I experience is evident. I experience in doing things. What is the nature of that? Frankly, it's irrelevant. And honestly, I don't particularly care, because I can't truly understand its nature. So what's the point? What I can do is experience it. And from that experience, I know, um, things happen in this world as I choose, whatever that even means. And the question is, what does it mean to me? What does it indicate within me about what's happening? I think, and I'm not really quite sure, I quite understand the disagreement between Yusuf and Birkan, other than maybe if I could distill it down into two ways, that maybe Yusuf is thinking about it in the sense of, in a discrete sense, in which referring to individual components and how they relate to one another, whereas Birkan maybe looking at something experientially, and holistically from his perspective. Maybe that's what I understood. What I would say is that, again, is that thinking about qadar in and of itself as some sort of independent entity, to me, is a false perception of the world. Like, there's no such thing as qadar out there. And I think that goes over to the very, very beginning of even this section, and that where he says is at the final limits of Islam or belief. I can't remember the exact wording, because it puts everything, my perspective of the world, in proper order. It clarifies my perspective of the world, the other principles of belief, matters of belief. It's not an entity. It's not something that I can actually point to or hold, or, that has some sort of, external like reality. It's just my perspective. And the question is, really, when I'm talking about qadar, is really what is my perspective of my life and what I'm experiencing in this world. And the issue of, like, let's say, if I, going back to that gun example, if I fire the gun, the issue of, like, am I responsible or not, or is it God's problem or not, to me is not the point in and of itself, because, again, I'm trying to speak about something that I can't hold on to tangibly. Like, I can only talk about what's evident, in that, if I didn't fire the gun, I don't know what would have happened. And if I did fire the gun and someone died, then I can say that me firing the gun killed the man, and that's it. And what does that mean? What does that point to? Then as he goes on to make this explanation, I think to me that is the clearest and simplest explanation of qadar, because it doesn't try to take God's perspective or frankly, you know, what he's responsible for, what he's not responsible for. It's simply taking what I experience, what's evident to me, and trying to make sense of it completely, in a complete sense. And not trying to posit something theoretical that hasn't happened, but using literally what's happening to me as I am, and then making sense of it. So I don't know if that really relates to what Yusuf and Birkan were talking about, but for me, simply, you know, my simple sort of understanding divine determining, that's kind of what I take away from Nursi.
Brother Sale, thanks for sharing. I think that is a very intuitive conclusion to make. But we will move on from this paragraph to the next section, which seems to be a conclusion on this topic as well. So we see clearly that at the time of their growth and development, the particles of living beings travel to their intricate extremities and halt. Then they change their path. At each of the extremities, they produce the fruits of benefits, uses, and instances of wisdom. Clearly, the forms of those things and their measures are drawn with a pen of determining. Thus, observable, evident determining shows that in the non-physical states of living beings also are well ordered, fruitful extremities and limits drawn with the pen of determining. Divine power is the source, divine determining is the pattern. Power writes the meaningful book on that pattern, since we understand clearly that the fruitful limits and purposeful extremities have been drawn with the pen of divine determining, physical and non-physical. Certainly, the states and stages which all living beings undergo in the course of their lives are also drawn with that pen, for their life stories follow a course with order and balance. They change forms and receive shapes, since the pen of divine determining thus rules in all living beings. Surely the life history of man, the world's most perfect fruit and vicegerent of the earth and bearer of the supreme trust, is more than anything dependent on the law of divine determining. Okay, so he's making mentions of the growth and development of living, of particles of living beings, and how they function in clear and ordered precise methods to create, various things, not some sort of randomness, but it's clear and ordered and precise, and that indicates a type of wisdom in what and how they function and what they do. Brother Suhail, would you like to say something?
Yeah, just back to the last point I was making. Again, he's using like this simple example. If you think like a plant or a tree, what's amazing, fascinating, is that like a particle of water, just a droplet of water, not even a droplet, a particle of water will travel through the roots of a tree up all the way to the leaves. It's fascinating in that, as he says, to the intricate extremities and halt. Then they change their path, and it ends up maybe in a fruit, like in an apple tree, and so ends up all the way from the root, from the sky, from the clouds to the ground, into the soil, into the root, and travels to the fruit. And clearly, the forms of those things and their measures are drawn with the pen of determining, and that he's saying that definitely points to the pen in that things. It's like the pen is drawing its path from one point to another. Because how else does the particle do that, or the particle of water, that droplet of water, do that? There's no other way. And then as he goes on to say, thus observable evident determining shows that in the non-physical states of living beings also are well ordered, fruitful extremities elements drawn with the pen of determining. And in that they have a pattern that's that you can't point to physically, but there is an evident reality to them, but they all point to a certain pattern that's being followed. And as he says, divine power is the source, divine determining is the pattern. In other words, I experience this creational command at this moment, which is what is evident, and I see what's happening. And from my ability to sort of observe the world, I can see some sort of pattern that's happening or that's being followed, and that points to divine determining. In other words, some sort of knowing of this, some sort of knowledge of this, and that knowledge manifests because of power and will. I can see that theoretical knowledge that I can't actually tangibly grasp. I can't see the path in and of itself. No one can point to a path. They can't show you the path of that droplet of water, but they can tell you, they can show you the particle moving of water moving from the root to the trunk to the extremities. But and from that they can glean, they can decipher a path, they can determine a pattern. Like that's what people do, is that they take multiple different points in their life and then they decipher a pattern from something. Where was the pattern to begin with? You can't actually see it. It's not physical per se, but you can glean it or decipher it from your observation of things. And that's what he's saying here, is that power and will essentially are what make that pattern known to me in the evident world, the manifest world, the tangible world. That's the creational command, and that command points to, because things follow a non-physical pattern, they must point to something that's beyond the nature of physics, beyond the nature of the physical world. Because where is that non-physical pattern if it's not of the nature of the world? It must be beyond the world, because by definition it's non-physical, and definitely points to absolute knowledge. So again, he's using the experience, observation of the world to make a determination of what's actually happening, to make sense of what's happening. So that's what I took away from the first part of that paragraph.
Fair enough. I think that is a great explanation of this paragraph. Does anyone else have any comments or questions or disagreements or anything else, I guess?
Sorry, I just want to say, he goes on to say just one more thing, in that, he then makes an analogy to, like, from the plants and the human being, in that, I have my own life story. Everybody has their own individual life stories. Everybody goes through life following their own sort of path. And you think about it like something is, I wouldn't say simple as this, but just having this conversation online, you think about all the things that must have happened in each of our lives to transpire for it to actually occur. Us meeting certain people, meeting each other, and not just generally, but even in this specific moment for this to happen. There's a story behind it, and we may think it's all trivial. When you like step back and reflect on it, it's something that you can't really quite make sense of. Because if I think about all the things that happen in my life, and everybody thinks about all the things that happen in their own personal lives, the things that and not just my life, and then my parents' life, and then their parents' life, and so on and so forth, all the way, not just to my, but expanding, you know, and expanding the horizon of the time horizon. There's a path there, and you only when you step back and think about it do you see, like, in the moment it's hard to make sense of it. It's only just like the path of a droplet of water from the root to the fruit. Like, in the moment you don't see it because it's not physical. You can't actually see it there. But when you have all of these points along the line on the path, then you can draw a line. And then you see, oh, there is a line there. It's not there, but it's there, in the abstract. Um, and it's interesting people deny that, but you think about it, it's there. One thing led to another, one event led to another, um, and there's a story there, and likewise, that story must be penned into being, penned into existence, and therefore must be known. You know, every history refers back to a certain um, overarching sort of ledger, overarching sort of uh, book, as he points out.
Yeah, very, very interesting. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. If there are not any more further comments or questions or concerns, I think we can end here. Thank you all who participated. We are not done yet, Brother Suhail.
Sorry, one last thing is that what I find fascinating is that he says man with the bear of the supreme trust is more than anything dependent on the law of divine determining. And that, just going back to the example of, like, us being here, if I had to think about all the things that must have transpired, and for me to be just to take in the totality of that sort of knowledge, and not just that, the totality of the knowledge that must have that required for things to transpire for in everybody else's life, and all the things that, or simply just even like using a computer or the internet or all these things, it's sort of incomprehensible in that regard. But if one thinks about it, just every bit and piece, and that's just this one thing, and then everything else in one's life, and then what else is happening in the world at the same time, or within me, for this just moment to take place. Man is most in need of it, because how else? I don't. There's no way anybody could know exactly how to manifest this moment right now, taking into account all the things that have precipitated or transpired in the past for it to happen. I can't know the path before it actually happened. Rather, I experience the path. I'm walking the path, and I only know about the path as I'm walking it. And if I didn't have that, then I would be sort of lost. I would be sort of, in despair, because, to have that supreme trust, or that ability that consciousness to sort of understand the world, to really to think and to feel, that would be all for naught. So in that regard, man is most in need of it, because he's given something so precious, and then to be left to fend for himself, to not know even that there is a path, or that he is walking on that path, would be something incomprehensible. So in that regard, because he is the most perfect fruit, he's the most dependent on the law of divine determining. So that's what I took away from that.
Yeah, thank you yet again. Certainly makes sense. And with that, we will end. Thank you, everyone who participated and everyone who is attending and listening attentively. Uh, you know, I hope this is beneficial to all of us. سبحانك اللهم بحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك